Welcome to the S.O.A.P.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the S.O.A.P. This episode we're going to be stepping back in time to talk about Assassin's Creed Unity. Now I'm joined by Delphine. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about why we decided to talk about this game specifically.
Hi everyone! I think just in the news recently, people would have heard of Notre Dame and the fire that happened in Paris and destroyed quite a big part of Notre Dame. And it was really sad, and I think a lot of people felt very concerned about it. And Ubisoft essentially jumped a little bit on the news and decided to release for free Assassin's Creed Unity so that people can go in the game, experience Notre Dame, but also to encourage people for donations to reconstruct the church. So that's it as far as a bit of context.
Yeah, it's quite good to see a developer getting behind something of importance and doing a little bit with it. Unity, what is it in a nutshell?
Well, Unity, Assassin's Creed Unity is an action-adventure game that was developed by Ubisoft, the Montreal team, and released in 2014 at the end of the year. So it is part of the Assassin's Creed series. It was the 5th game after Black Flag, and essentially in terms of story, it also has ties with Assassin's Creed Rogue, which I did not play myself, but is part of the storyline.
Yeah, Rogue was an interesting one because when all of this came out, Black Flag came out in the middle of the swap over between PS3 and PS4. Unity, when it came out, it was a PS4 exclusive or Xbox One exclusive. It wasn't previous gen at all. But Rogue came out about the same time, yet it was on the previous generations. So it was a bit strange and a lot of people did miss out on it. Now we're actually at the point where you can actually play the remasters on PS4, Xbox One, all that kind of stuff. But for most people, if you didn't want to go back to your PS3 or your Xbox 360, you missed out because they didn't decide to bring it across. So it's a very strange one. Unity, though, what's this one about? Black Flag, the last game in the series, was about pirates. Are we seeing the unity of all pirates?
No, Assassin's Creed Unity is interesting because it's set within the real events in France of the French Revolution. So it is still fictional in that we have the modern day story of assassins that are still against Templars that are looking for pieces of Eden. But as far as the memories that they are exploring, it's all set around the French Revolution. So it starts in Paris, and the main protagonist, Arnaud, is the player that we get to explore memories from within the revolution.
So Assassin's Creed, you mentioned this is number 5. It's the 8th major release in the series. When we talk about number 2 having multiple copies and then Rogue. What's new about this one? What makes this one unique or evolved from previous iterations?
So a lot of it is the same as previous games. However, it was the game that had some innovations in terms of combat. It had some innovations in parkour, and it introduces the run up and run down within the game, which made traveling through different obstacles much easier. And it also had some innovations in terms of stealth. One of the new things within the game, for example, was the Phantom Blade that was introduced, and essentially is the same as the Hidden Blade, but had a crossbow improvement, so can be used from a distance as well. What's new in that particular game as well was that it introduced co-op player. So for the first time, players would be able to engage together in missions. So there were heists and other co-op modes for players to do together.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about looking at Assassin's Creed is every game has had not game-changing upgrades, but everything that they add is something that when you go back to a previous game, you just can't go without these kind of things. And that run up and run down mechanics, and you get points just for doing it. It was a very smooth system, and it took away part of the hassle. Assassin's Creed was very well known for climbing up objects and getting stuck. The smallest of movements, that anyone like you or me could do, your character would have trouble with. Meanwhile, impossible jumps and climbs, the character would be doing, without any trouble. So they took away a little bit of the frustration with all the climbing mechanics by using, that parkour system, and it made it a lot more fluid. The story, though, I might just jump to that because it's quite a core part of this game. What do we have to talk about with the story? We've got Arno, Elise, a little bit of Romeo and Juliet.
A little bit. Do you want me to get into the main story that we play within the game?
Yeah, I guess warning for anyone who's about to listen, there will be some minor spoilers coming up. We won't spoil endings or anything like that, but we will talk about some of the core storyline parts. So if you are worried about having it spoiled, obviously the game's been out for quite some time, but if you are worried, maybe tune out just for a little bit. But yeah, take us away, Delphine. Tell us a bit more about the story.
So the story revolves around Arno, and Arno, we learn that his father was killed when he was a kid. And he doesn't really know a whole lot about his father at this point in time, but we discover throughout the game that his father was actually a member of the Assassins. So he gets adopted, and his adopted father is a Templar. And his adopted father does get murdered. Sadly for Arno, he gets to witness that, and he gets accused of the murder of his adoptive father. We also understand that he was meant to deliver a note to him, and he didn't because he wanted to go and meet Elise at a party, who is essentially his adoptive sister that he likes quite a little bit.
What?
He goes to the party and his adoptive father does get murdered. He ends up at the Bastille because he has been found guilty of killing him. And within the Bastille, he meets with Belek, who is a member of the Assassins. And essentially Arno discovers that his father was an assassin and that he too can see all that the Assassins can see to discover more clues. He escapes from the Bastille, that is the first mission that you play, and joins the Assassins. What's really interesting is that while everything happens in the premise of the revolution, and you learn quite a bit about the revolution and the time period while playing the game, when Arno begins, he's only interested in revenge. He wants to know who killed his father, and he wants to find them and kill them.
I guess with Arno, it kind of parallels the Black Flag storyline. Black Flag, we had Edward Kenway, who, as a pirate, he just tries to survive. He does things for himself. He doesn't really care about anyone else, and he doesn't really have honor. And honor is one of those core factors of being an assassin, is that you're part of this brotherhood to do the greater good and stop, the Templars who, I guess are the dishonorable side, trying to use all this power for themselves. So it's interesting that Arno and Edward Kenway kind of had that same storyline. Arno just wants revenge. He uses the assassins to learn what he needs to do what he wants to do, not what they want to do. I guess at the end of the day, do we like Arno? Is Arno a likable character, or is he kind of just the bastard of the story?
I did like Arno. He can be a little bit annoying in that he's really just wanting to do what he wants. And I think his sense of wanting revenge is pretty strong. But he's very relatable, and I felt like he was reasonably likable throughout the game. He also meets a lot of other real people that existed within the time period, such as Napoleon Bonaparte, Danton, Robespierre, that are all within the story as well.
What about Elise? Like, she's the love interest. It's, like I said, that Romeo and Juliet, they're on opposite sides. She's a Templar, he's an assassin. They can't be together. Do we like Elise as opposed to Arno? Because I found the lack of her in the storyline. She's always there, but she's not as involved as, everyone else is. Do we like Elise, or do we not get enough time to like her?
Look, I felt like there was not much character development for Elise in some way. I personally wasn't a big fan of her. I think that the whole sort of love story may not, for me, have been deep enough in some way. We understand it a little bit, but it goes from this very superficial thing to a little bit deep, and I don't necessarily think that in terms of storyline they did that very well within the game. I was not a big Elise fan. What about you?
Yeah, I really don't think I got to know her well enough. I always felt like whenever she would appear, I was excited that she was there because I wanted to know more. I just never felt like I got to. I felt like she was more just a tool of Arno's story than actually part of the story. We mentioned the historical accuracies and inaccuracies of this game, particularly Templars versus Assassins not really existing. Do we think that it impacts the actual storyline? The French Revolution has such a, strong storyline and many different stories within stories with it. Does the Templars versus Assassins take away from the actual French Revolution in this game?
Taking away, I don't know. I mean, if you know the events the way they happened, I think it's easy enough to understand what's fictional and what took a little bit of freedom in explaining some of the events, obviously. But if you really don't know a whole lot, I think that there are quite a few things in the game that are accurate, and I'm more than happy to explain what is, what isn't. Obviously, Templars, by the years 1789, pretty much we know that historically, it's documented that the Templars disappeared much earlier, probably around 400 years earlier, and actually the game begins with the scene where we see the last Grand Master of the Templars being burnt at the stake. So we understand that a little bit, and I think that the game is done well enough that it adds to the story and the intrigue of people that are doing the revolution and how Arno's story fits within that. I don't necessarily think that it takes away from the revolution. It's a pretty good premise to be interested in it and learn a little bit, even though some of it, of course, is not exactly accurate in the depiction.
Do you know, were these French people that were writing this storyline, or did they have to outsource to find this kind of information? Where did this all kind of come from?
So Ubisoft did explain that they had help from academic historians to help them in regards to the revolution story as well. And I believe they also worked with people in regards to doing all the mapping of Paris as well as all the landmarks. That's something that's really impressive in the game, is how they really reconstructed a whole lot of areas of Paris and monuments that if you haven't been to Paris before, it gives you a very good idea. And to me, it was actually one of the great things about playing the game, was seeing places that I've been to, but not necessarily enjoyed as much by not being able to climb to the top and hang on the wall of a building. So that gives you a really unique perspective. That for that, there are a lot of things that look real. They've done really well in terms of both the story and the revolution, but also in terms of landmarks in particular.
I know, I guess a shout out to Greg who normally listens, but Greg, when we were playing Spider-Man, as I was swinging around the city and that, he was always excited when these landmarks would appear in front of you. And it was quite interesting playing Spider-Man, hearing his experiences about these landmarks that he had visited, how accurate they were, that kind of thing. In terms of Unity, when we're looking at, the Eiffel Tower in the Helix missions, then you got Notre Dame, Statue of Liberty, all of that. You're telling me that if I was playing this game, I am seeing what it would have actually looked like back in the day.
Absolutely. It's really well done in terms of the architecture, and what they've used is really, really spot on. And we know that they worked really hard for some of these buildings. They took them a long time, Notre Dame in particular, because we are talking about, the fire, and Ubisoft have actually explained that they would be happy to present the plans that they had for the game to help the reconstruction, because they spent, they're saying, almost 2 years in completing the build within the game. So quite impressive in that regards. As far as the rest of Paris, there are certainly some areas that have changed quite dramatically from what I've seen versus the game, but it's definitely very, very accurate.
All right, well, let's talk about the historical accuracies and things like that. They always blow me away. And Notre Dame, like being modeled down to essentially each individual brick, taking 2 years. That stuff always blows me away. How did people feel about this game when it actually was released?
Look, there wasn't a real consensus about it. A lot of people agreed that it was a great game in regards to, the visuals, the gameplay. I think that parkour thing was really well received. And we didn't talk about this before, but you could also really customize your weapons, your equipment, and your skills for the first time in an Assassin's Creed game as well. So that was received really, really well, including the multiplayer aspect. However, there were a few bugs, and there were a few things in there that, really killed the release. And that was particularly bad because the game was released later than originally planned. So when that happened, people thought, well, they are releasing a few months later. Obviously, they fixed a lot of the stuff that was expected, perhaps not to go really well. And in fact, it did still have a whole lot of technical issues. Myself, having played after all the patches and only very recently, I have to say I've not experienced them as much. It happened a couple of times, but not a whole lot. But it was so bad that Ubisoft actually did do official apologies and offered compensation to people who had pre-ordered the game.
Now, if I remember correctly, because I did hear about it at the time, so they stopped the Season Pass, which is a key feature of pretty much all games these days, not just Assassin's Creed. And anyone who had purchased it, I think, got 6 games, if I remember correctly, or one of 6 games you could choose as their way of saying, we've already taken your money, we're not going to give it back, but have this free thing in return. So I think it was Black Flag, the previous game, The Crew, Far Cry 4, Just Dance 2015, if I remember correctly, Rayman's Legends, or Watch Dogs. Watch Dogs was quite good. And they said, you can have extra content to do with like Assassin's Creed Chronicles and all that kind of stuff. And that's a huge, huge thing to say, like, we've screwed up so badly that we'll give you, like, Far Cry 4 and things like that are full price games at that time. To give a whole full price game to someone just to say, I'm sorry, means that it really illustrates how bad that was. They also had, one of the things we haven't talked about was the mobile app. So with Black Flag, you could control your ship battles to get more resources, things like that. In Unity, they had their own app, and that was used to unlock the armor, where we talk about the customizing armor and things like that. By using the app and competing in the games and that with it, you'd be able to unlock these chests throughout the map. And you just run up to it, open it, and it would give you a unique piece of armor, that kind of thing. Again, with how badly everything was received, they had to pull that app completely from the game. And I actually tried to have a look at the app when I was playing, because it has been a while since I played, but also well after all of this happened. That app I couldn't find at all. I couldn't find anything to do with it. I couldn't download it, play it, or anything like that. And all the content was automatically unlocked in the game. So they completely removed that as well. How did they go from there? Like, we've talked about initial, here, have some free stuff as a result. Did they learn from this mistake? Because we had Syndicate come after it. What happened as their response to all of this?
I think they learned from it. I'm not sure that what they did was necessarily enough, because that really hit the franchise quite dramatically if you look at the sales of all the games all the way up to Unity. It pretty much went down from there. Which is really sad. But certainly Ubisoft have explained that they did take on all that feedback. Initially, they were releasing a game every year, and that's pretty much when they announced that they would stop doing the annual release. Probably Syndicate did get released the following year. It's likely that they already had quite a lot of that particular game done. The mechanics and the feel for it, of course, a different city and different timeline, but is very, very similar to Unity. But after that, they did take quite a long break before coming back with the game. So I do think that they learned from it.
Yeah, Syndicate's the interesting one because, like you said, they would have had it already in the work. They're not making a whole brand new game, 1 year every year. they would have had things well in the works by the time they realized how much they'd screwed up the Unity launch. So they were locked into the Syndicate launch, but the problem was everyone who loves Assassin's Creed has played Unity on launch, and then you see Syndicate coming out, and all of a sudden people are like, well, you burnt me once, I'm not going to do that again. So Syndicate took a huge hit as well as a result of what happened with Unity. And then after that, we skip the year of launches and we go to a movie that got released. And the movie, I don't know how to really describe it for people who haven't seen it. The movie really missed the mark of what was already in the Assassin's Creed universe. They had the chance, if we go back to Assassin's Creed 1, where Desmond enters the Animus and for the first time goes back in history to find his ancestor, and they have this in-depth storyline both in the real world and in the Animus and going back in time. When they took this movie, they changed the Animus completely. So no longer is it just something that you lie on. It becomes this big tool that goes into your spine, and he suddenly starts learning in the real world how to actually become an assassin and do all the moves because this device starts controlling him. And then it goes back in time to a new time period not related to any of the games. And the depth of the character is really hard to get into. It was a movie, I ended up tuning out in the movie. That's how much I thought of it. I don't know what there is to say about that movie. It wasn't the worst experience I've had. It just wasn't worth paying attention to.
It was really a lost opportunity there because I think they had really a chance to make people understand what Assassin's Creed is all about. I knew the game franchise, but I'm pretty sure that I may have started playing Syndicate and seen the movie almost around the same time. And for me, this whole, history of memories that are part of the DNA and the Animus and all that was still new to me. And there was a great opportunity there, I think, to get people to understand that a little bit better. And it was really poorly executed. It's not a movie that I particularly enjoyed, and often video game releases in movies are, not always done very, very well, but that was definitely a miss.
Yeah, I guess the movie, at that point, they were so far down that path, there was no coming back. But I guess the thing that Unity did that was probably its greatest achievement was actually take them back and make them start thinking about what they were doing. It was no longer just we make a game, we release a game, we make a game, we release a game. The problems that they had forced them to actually step back, rethink everything that they were doing, and put a new life into the games. After that, we see Origins and Odyssey is the latest one out at the moment, where they've added a lot more mechanics, but they just took that time to polish it off so that they never made that same mistake again. And I think the franchise as an overall is in a lot better position because of Unity and the problems it had to start with. Like you said, though, playing it now, there's none of those problems. It does play very smoothly. I mean, it still has some issues climbing, but that's more a mechanic that they never polished off correctly, not really a bug. Overall, Unity, I guess, how do you feel? You're still playing it at the moment. You're the best person to talk about it mid-game. How do you feel about Unity as a whole?
I really enjoy it because I did not experience all these issues at the time of release. To me, it's almost strange how much people hate on the game still now, because it is actually a really good game. I'm enjoying it a lot. There are some things that I like more than others within the game and the way it's being played. I think being French, understanding to what depth the developers have gone to in terms of the history, in terms of the French voices as well, is a little bit special for me. I can understand dialogues and also just in the crowd, sometimes some of the AI characters will speak. And so for me, it'd be very different an experience, I suppose, than for you, perhaps. If you're hiding or doing something, you would have one of the characters that might say something like, "Ouh, il a bien l'air suspicieux, celui-là," which essentially translates to, this guy is a little bit suspicious. And, all these little things that Mia could get because of French language, the universe that you're in and the city of Paris and the landmarks, as I said before, was really great for me. And then in terms of the history as well, very different perhaps for me. I enjoyed that because it added a little bit to some old memories of history lessons from a very long time ago. But I found the game really fun, and I'm on my way to 100% completion and a platinum trophy if everything goes well in the near future.
Yeah, one of the things you talk about is the extra value that you get when you can understand what they're saying and things like that. For me, I don't know, that's a mixed bag because part of it makes me understand how authentic they've gone to making this experience. Yet at the same time, it's one of those things where you're like, I don't know what they're saying, so do I miss something? So there's always that question of, am I missing something more with this game? The storyline overall, I mean, the French Revolution isn't something that I've looked at that in depth. Obviously, you get a lot more because that's your personal history and your culture. But for me, I've never been more of a modern history or anything like that person. So I know rough details, but I don't get as into that storyline with it. So for me, I'm in this game more to see Arno and what Arno's going to do and how the assassins play out. And I've got to say that that's probably one of the weaker parts of this game. Everything else is done really, really well. The mechanics are good. The visuals are stunning for its time. But Arno, I didn't find him that likable. I didn't really get on his side. Elise, like I said, I always wanted to know more of and cheer for her more, but she just never gets in the story, and it's kind of weird that they're brother and sister, but not brother and sister, and in love, but not in love. And that's just a whole weird bag right there that never really gives you that payoff that feeling weird was worth it. Mechanically, it took everything that the old Assassin's Creed had, except for pirate ships, and made them better. I would love to drive around the streets of Paris in a pirate ship, but I can understand why that wasn't a possibility. The multiplayer was an interesting one. Playing it after launch, like we said, the game had bugs. It killed off a lot of the player base, a lot of issues. Playing the multiplayer, there wasn't really... I mean, there's no local population for it. No one in Australia particularly is playing it. So you are connecting to other people overseas. And even then, finding a game was very hard. But you mentioned going for the Platinum Trophy. They tied the multiplayer, which is... not like a traditional multiplayer where you're versing each other or anything like that, like in Black Flag, but in this one, it's a co-op multiplayer. Now, that's a great idea, and I really prefer that over competitive multiplayer. The fact that I get to play with my friends and do missions together, things like that. But without a population, those missions get wasted quite a lot. And it would have been nice that they'd thought about, well, what if this player is playing offline, or what if this player is playing at a time when other people aren't? And that I felt like was a big missed opportunity for the co-op and multiplayer side, was that there was this great content, but I wasn't experiencing it how they had designed it to be experienced. So that was a bit sad. Then we've got the whole idea of gear. We talked about customizing your character, getting better gear. There is a wide variety of weapons and outfits, things that you can do. You can dress up like the previous assassins, which is all really cool. But there is no progression from start to finish with those weapons. You instantly are able to unlock the highest level as long as you have enough money. And very early on in the game, they give you income from shops. And those shops keep ticking over money. If you just leave the game going, you just collect your money. Early on in the game, you can have the highest level gear, and that makes all the missions extremely easy, whether you're trying to get the 100% for the completion or whether you're just rushing through it. The gear really does impact the game, and the co-op, again, to make it viable, you need that maximum level gear because you're often not going to have anyone else to play with. So your character has to become so strong that you can do everything by yourself. And that works mostly for a lot of levels. There are some escort missions which do require you to be on two sides of a street and that kind of stuff, taking people out. So when you're doing that by yourself, that becomes really, really hard. But I just feel like the co-op idea was the idea that they needed and didn't execute properly. And I guess that comes back to the fact that they didn't finish the game in time. There could have been so much more that they did with all of this, and they never ever got to that point. So that's a bit of a letdown in terms of having a great idea but not executing it properly. But overall, it's a mixed bag. There's some things they did really, really well, and other things I felt like they could have spent more time doing it. But then, like I said, they ran out of time anyway. So overall, though, it's fun. It's a good, solid game. It's not the best in the series. It's certainly not Black Flag. You know, at that point, they're coming after such a big hit that they had big boots to fill, and I think they tried to, and that's probably what caused it. But for people who haven't played it, now's like a perfect time to do everything but the multiplayer.
Yeah, I think so. The multiplayer has been one of my frustrations in the game. Finishing the missions solo can be difficult, in particular when you've not yet gotten all that money to buy, the best gear. I have at times found it really annoying because a lot of these missions, you will have multiple chests and you have to go and find the right chest. And if luck is with you, like it always is with me, it's always going to be the last chest. So these missions can sometimes take you, 40 minutes to complete by yourself because you have to be a little bit more careful about where you're going because there's too many mobs. So it has been a little bit frustrating. There are some missions that you literally cannot complete on your own. And luckily for me, that's the only mission that I managed to get people. I think everybody just goes for that one. So it's certainly been a little bit frustrating. And the fact that some of the trophies for the platinum is also linked to some achievements within co-op, for me is frustrating because at this point in time, I'm pretty sure that there is some of that will require me to go and ask, for someone to be online and help, which is always a little bit annoying when you play a game a little bit later on and it doesn't have a population. I do much prefer being able to do everything by myself when possible. There were some things within the game that I did not enjoy, probably. The Helix Rifts for me were a little bit it was great to see Paris in a different timeline, but beyond that, I did not particularly like that mechanic of jumping and going to grab things. Not the type of thing that I want to do if I'm playing Assassin's Creed, to be really honest. And the murder mysteries were a bit of a hit and miss. The first few ones that I did, I thought, this is kind of fun. And by now, when I'm on the last ones to complete, I just find that it's so much reading and listening, and I find it a little bit boring, to be honest. So that wasn't really my favorite thing. But being only the second Assassin's Creed that I played, and the first one I played was Syndicate, and I got it for free. So that's how I ended up playing Assassin's Creed, because I really didn't expect that I would play it. Unity, I enjoy much more than I have Syndicate. So I think that there's a lot of good stuff in it. It's not perfect as a game, but maybe because I've not played other games and because I did not get all, the letdown of the initial release and the issues, I'd say it's definitely worth playing now. If anything, just to have a look at a lot of the beautiful landmarks and buildings of Paris.
One of the things you mentioned there was hunting trophies. So if you're playing on PlayStation, you've got the bronze, silver, gold, and platinum trophy. For Xbox players, you normally just have a gamer score. One of the trophies there is to collect every single chest in that game. How do you feel about that one?
It's a lot of grinding. I'm getting there. I don't know how many chests there are, but I swear there must be something like 300. There are a lot of chests. Initially, if you do it in waves and do a little bit at a time, it's not too bad, but it can get a little bit repetitive. Some of these chests are really easy to get to, and some of them you just can't really see, and they might be in catacombs or in sewers and so on. So it's both interesting and boring at the same time. I like grinding for games, so I don't mind it. But there are days where I'm just like, all right, this is the same thing over and over that I'm doing, and it's a little bit boring over time. There are so many items. I believe that's the case with every Assassin's Creed, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty common, at least in this era, to have just a ridiculous amount of collectibles. And for anyone who is like trophy hunting or that, it's a big pain point. It gets to a point where you've done what they wanted you to do, like finding these chests, going to new locations. 100% of chests is a bit too much to ask when there are so many. It would have been nice if they'd, portion it out and, find 50% of chests or 100 chests in total or something like that to encourage you to do it, but not force you to really grind it out. So that one is one of the big pain points of the game. The other thing we probably haven't talked about is the DLC. Now, I know you haven't tried that. Going back to the fact that they had such a poor launch, the season pass got cancelled, but they had already pretty much done most of the first DLC. So they released that one for free for everyone who didn't have the season pass. So you didn't have to buy the season pass to get this one for free. Everyone, even right now, if you wanted to, you can go download it. It added a whole new map, some new mechanics. It's got more of a above ground and underground tiered system for the map. And they added these new ways where you've got gangs of people and they have leaders, and defeating the leaders can make other people run away and things like that. They added new weapons as well to that, and more costumes, new collectibles, all that. That DLC shows how much of an idea they had for this game. It's one of those things where you kind of feel bad that they had such a bad launch, because if that first DLC is any kind of example of where they were going with that game, like I would happily have paid for both that DLC and another 3 or 4 DLCs on top of it. Like that DLC really did do that game justice. So it's a bit sad that we didn't really get to see more from that.
I'm looking forward to playing it because I do really enjoy the game, and it'll give me a little bit more to do in it after I finish all those chests.
Yeah, it's going to be a big relief to do something a little bit different. If that's all you're doing at the moment is finishing off the main game first, once you get up to that DLC, it's going to be a breath of fresh air until you realize there's more collectibles. Well, that's pretty much everything that we've covered in this episode. Do you have any extra points of that with it?
No, not really. I think I explained what I wanted to explain, and what I think about the game, and how much I surprisingly enjoy it.
Perfect. Well, we'll wrap it up there. For everyone listening, go out, get a copy of Unity. It really is worth a play. For anyone who likes Assassin's Creed or anything like it, it is definitely worth it. And the bugs and that are definitely all gone. You shouldn't have any troubles there. Thanks everyone for listening to this episode. Please, if you can, like, subscribe, give us a couple of comments, all that kind of stuff. Share it around as well. It always helps if you share it around. You'll find us on Facebook, YouTube, SoundCloud, and from SoundCloud, all the podcast apps such as iTunes, Google Play Store, all that kind of stuff. We have got our own Reddit section, so if you want to drop us a comment or request some content, things like that, jump on there. A reminder that our Patreon is live, so you can pledge as little as $1 a month to support us and fund new content. It really does go a long way. Even that $1 a month can be the difference between certain types of equipment or content. We have got a couple of big ideas in the works at the moment, but we will definitely need some funding for it. So please, as little as $1 a month will really make us bring that content out and give you the best experience possible. Thank you everyone for listening. We look forward to your comments, and thank you Delphine for joining us.
Thank you.
You have been listening to the S.O.A.P podcast. Join us again soon for another episode, and don't forget to hit us up on all the social media platforms because we love hearing from you.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
Fun fact, there are 294 chests and 128 cockades in Assassin's Creed Unity main game. That's a whole lot of collectibles.